Hello, hello. It's Ben Wheeler running a solo act just like the old days. Anthony Marquetta sadly cannot join us, but we will be with you just momentarily. I'm joined today by JD Cowan, author of many different pulp books, but in this case, the pulp book we're talking about is, and of course I just dropped my Amazon page, The Pulp
It's,
Mindset, isn't it?
yep, that's the one. It's the Pulp Mindset. Just came out the last, was it Thursday? I think it was.
Right.
Yeah.
And I've been doing nothing but sleeping and working since then. But enjoy. I do enjoy when these sort of things come out. The Pulp Mindset. The link is down in the description below. I always want to shout out to my readers. I know you support the things I enjoy. Uh, Honestly, it looks a great book. I've set it on my to read list. We got things like What is Pulp, The Pulp Mindset, Action, Wonder, Revolution Writing, as well as, I believe, at least in some blog posts, you've talked about the current environment. Is that right? For
Yes.
authors.
Current environment. The new pub atmosphere, which is obviously insinuating that old pub is the old traditional way of publishing, the big five publishers.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, new pub is the independent stuff that's going on right now. All the smaller publishers and the independents that are going out there and basically making a killing out there, all in
Oh,
different areas.
I love to hear that.
Me.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so, I guess it's hard to sort of describe without us really having a good sense of what pulp is. Of course,
Mm-hmm.
everyone has the image of Conan the Barbarian, um,
Mm-hmm.
with a sword in one hand, girl in the other, and
Mm-hmm.
just having a, shall we say, good old time, at least for him. Um,
Yeah.
Anyone else, it's kind of questionable, but he's having a good time. Um,
Yeah.
what does it look like in the modern era?
Hmm. Well, it's kind of hard to say. I think I grew up with most other people. All we knew about pulp was a movie called Pulp Fiction by Quentin Tarantino. That's more or less all anybody knew about the term. But
Hmm.
recent years, excuse me, it's been kind of turning around with stuff like first it was a new pulp that came out, I think it was called, and then there's Pulp Revolution, and there's a whole bunch of other people who just call their own fiction pulp fiction. It's mostly harking back to the older days of adventure and action first storytelling and having everything unfurl from that, just like they did back in the magazine days. Instead of the way they do it in the traditional or old pub circuit, which is we have these quotas we want you to fill, and you have to fill these quotas or you won't get published.
And
So
even
it's
then, they might not publish you if you don't
yeah,
toe the
yeah,
right line, or even if your sales are merely mediocre,
yeah, and you might even get thrown off your publisher if you put the wrong message in one of your books. It's happened to a few authors.
right? I know that's probably the reason why we don't see much from John C. Wright outside of, what he can publish through the excellent Chris Kennedy Publishing as well as Superversive Press when it was still around. He
Yep.
was originally published by Tor, but of course, him
Hmm.
being a good Catholic probably rankled them.
Yeah, and his, if I remember correctly, his cover artist called him all kinds of names as well, which is not good for
Really?
business. When, yeah, it
That's
was
such a pity.
it was a really weird time of the puppy days. It's a really strange time.
That
Although now we don't really have to worry about that so much because they have their own problems over there to worry about. So
that like finding new jobs. Ugh.
yeah, and finding out which one of their own guys they should throw under the bus next.
Right?
Meanwhile, everybody over here is just doing their own stuff, and we're doing a lot better off without those guys.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
It's like people like to think of themselves as, oh well, I'll be the next Neil Gaiman or whatever. But the thing is that Neil Gaiman produces a lot more than probably 90% of those still serving old pub. Um,
Yeah.
you've got you've got a long way before you get that J.K. Rowling money.
Oh yeah, it's a long ways off from that.
Oh yeah, but the goal is to be have enough money to buy our own Star Destroyer. Come on,
Yeah,
that's in there. It's in the little wish list.
everybody wants enough money to blow up at least one planet in their lifetime. Just one.
Or a large asteroid. I'm not picky.
Just got to blow something up. Doesn't matter what.
Yep. Like say, sales. Sales, pretty good blow up. So
Yeah.
we've
Mm-hmm.
established that Old Pub is very much not healthy. It's not healthy to
Mm.
be in. It's not healthy to really try to establish yourself in if you're a new author. And other people have mentioned this. I know I've mentioned this. Um, it's well known by now that unless you're going for things that I'm just going to call not fun,
Mm.
and are guaranteed to be bought by Barack Obama, you're probably not welcome in Old Pub. And I mean that in the nicest possible way.
Mm. And from every person I've heard, both who worked in the system or worked around the system, unless you have a very specific part of a very specific network or know somebody in the very specific network, you're not getting in.
Yep.
Doesn't matter how good you are. It doesn't
Like,
matter what stories you tell.
hmm there's that classic story of John Scalzi basically saying, "I can write like Heinlein used to write."
Mm.
To his friend who was a publisher at Tor or an editor or something like that. I can't quite remember. And, he got in.
Yeah.
And now he's kind of successful. I don't know. He sold
Um,
books.
I guess I don't
Yeah.
really know much about the guy since he went off a couple of years ago on his many rants. I don't really keep up with him anymore.
Yeah, that's fair. I was only mentioning it as a story of the inherent corruption within
Mm.
uh, Old
Oh, he comes
Pub.
off my feed all the time. He's always whining about something. I don't pay attention to him, but it's quite funny whenever I see him whining about something. So
It's
I got something
something.
on.
Whether
Jeez.
it's one of his friends being accused of being a rapist, or if it's any of the other improprieties that's following Old Pub. Well, okay, let's cut this that down.
Hmm.
If you are a moral, upstanding individual who would love to tell a really good story, you
Hmm.
probably do not belong in Old Pub.
No, not anywhere near it.
Not anywhere near
Not
it.
even close. Not even we're close. Just go online and figure out what you need to publish yourself because those guys ain't going to help you.
Yep. And
They don't
so,
want anything to do with you.
oh, absolutely. So with books like yours, you're sort of laying out what the environment is and what you need to do to write those old, really well selling pulp classics,
Hmm.
excuse me.
Yeah.
Um, that honestly the world needs more of in a bad way.
Hmm. Yeah. Well, one of the reasons I started writing in the first place is because nobody was writing the books I wanted to read anymore, and the entertainment landscape was pretty bad at the time. So I figured,
Mm-hmm.
well, might as well do it myself. So I started to learn how to do it myself, which was took a long time because there weren't any real resources out there. I mean, I think anybody who's a writer knows if you want to learn how to write, there isn't really a good way to learn. You just got to do it yourself and hope for the best. But thankfully, I found El Jaji Lamplighter as my first editor who helped me learn the basics, and I worked from there. And that's where I got a lot of my the basis for a lot of my advice for writing on in the
Mm-hmm.
book was from her. It was because I have a bunch of writing books. I don't know if you ever heard of John Gardner. He has a few of them. They were popular a long time ago, but they're like you have to construct a sentence to do this. You have to construct a paragraph to do that, but it doesn't tell you exactly how you write it. Like
Mm-hmm.
the right nouns, verbs, adverbs. You just got to learn it for yourself, and that's why in the writing section I pretty much just lay out just if you want to learn to do it yourself, just find a book you like, write a sentence out yourself. Just
Mm-hmm.
try to learn it that way. And that was the biggest problem I found when learning to write. So I figured, well, if I've had such a problem learning to write, there's got to be other people who are want to learn themselves, but just can't find anything, and they don't want to read that Stephen King book everybody always recommends on writing. I think it's called, because not everybody is Stephen King. You know what I mean? Not everybody is John Gardner, and not everybody is me either. So
Right.
I
And the
thought more general advice would help.
and and like, honestly, the things that make me excited aren't the same thing as what makes everyone else excited.
Mm.
I like my ego to be stroked with a lovely complex sentence structure, with drama, and having metaphorical meaning behind punching a werewolf. But other people might just like having a werewolf being punched, and their choices um, are just as legitimate as my desires.
Mm. Yeah, there's a lot of that in writing advice where it says if you're going to do this, you have to have it mean this or something
Right.
similar to that. You might not be that kind of a writer though. You might not want
Yep.
to write that sort of thing. So, like I said, one of the reasons I was interested in learning pulp in the first place was because it's action first storytelling, which doesn't necessarily mean like action scenes like car chases or explosions. It just means action, something happening.
Yep.
That's the most important part. As long as you focus on something happening, the rest of it is a lot more easier to get straight in your head. At least I think so.
Oh, absolutely. Like, it's I was watching something about the Ruby show, which was, like, the poster child for wasted potential. And
Mm.
you have this scene where, like, these two characters are fighting, and one guy's trying to figure out the secret of Pyrrha's, power that makes her so powerful. And then, like, the next scene, literally next scene, is just him relaxing in the dorm room and going, "Yeah, her power's magnetism. It's pretty amazing." And it's like, ugh, and you just start crying because so much potential is wasted. Um,
Oh,
but it's
oh boy.
you know like,
Hmm.
comparing the two scenes like night and day. Something's happening. There's a fight scene, and then nothing.
Yeah, I've noticed that a lot, and especially in recent years, a lot of more modern entertainment, they really don't know how to do action properly, I guess. Like the
Hmm.
most recent, I guess, go there, the most recent Star Wars movies, a lot of people really dislike them because nothing that happens in them really matters. A lot of the reason
Yep.
it doesn't matter is because there's no weight to anything that happens, because the action isn't really very important in it. Like that one throne room scene I saw about 100 times with the over choreographed movements where somebody should have been stabbed through the back,
Right.
and they just don't do it. It just takes you right right out of it. The reason they don't do that is because they want an emotional reaction out of the scene. They don't really care about the action at all, and that's a big problem.
Yep. And it's like, a lot of the times I'm discovering it's not the pieces. It's not the pieces
Mm-hmm.
of that they're putting together that's the problem. It's the execution. Having a
Mm-hmm.
throne room fight before the evil emperor, who's
Mm-hmm.
saying, "You must kill the one you love and show how evil you truly are,"
Yeah.
isn't is a great scene. But then putting
Mm-hmm.
it to Queen music, and it's going, "Having a good time, having a good time." Burn, burn, burn. Mm-mm. No, no, thank you.
Yeah, it's a bit much. Yeah, it's like when I said action for storytelling is you have to focus on what's happening right before you, not like some bigger thing like your main character has to be aloof or she has to have everything handed to her, so the scene has to play out a certain way or else it doesn't matter. And you just can't write that way because it's
Hmm.
very dishonest. You have to do what is right for the story itself, which is always to move forward with action. Go to the next beat. Don't slow
Yep.
it down just to navel gaze, as Adam said in the chat there. Yeah.
Yep. Navel gazing is not escapist fantasy. That is a true statement. Uh, and more true now when everyone's kind of navel gazing than it was, maybe in the 1920s or 30s or whatever.
Yeah, that's one of my biggest problems with a lot of like modern movies. Every single one of them seems so over serious and
Right.
so stiff, and they're always like 3 hours long now or something like that. It's
right. But it's not
what
even
happened to
like
an old
sorry.
yeah. No problem. It's just like it's like those old like canon action movies are about 90 minutes long. You're in, you're out, and
Right.
then you can just go home and say, that was great. Now to move on with my day. You can't do that anymore. It has to be some
Yep.
sort of deep philosophical rumination on nihilism, because it's always nihilism.
Right. And it's not even like it doesn't even like look good anymore. Which
Yeah.
it used to. It used to look good. It used to have all this deeper meaning, and so you could actually have a discussion with it. But honestly, I've
Mm-hmm.
talked to more about the Zack Snyder movie Sucker Punch than I have like any of the bestsellers from Star Wars or anything like that, except to remind people that yes, the new Star Wars movies suck to high heaven. Please do not spend your money on them.
Oh yeah. I'm also like I'm not that big of a fan of CG to begin with, so
Hmm.
it doesn't do a whole lot for me, especially when just about everything now is done with computers. So everything just looks like a video game and not a particularly interesting one. It's the
Right.
same one actually, because everything they use the same computers, the same effects. It's just
Yep.
I prefer practical effects just because it just gives you more of a warmth, and it tricks your mind easier. I guess is the best way to put it. That it's not real, but it is real. You know what I mean? At the same
Yep.
time, because it is real. They are doing it, but it's fake.
I mean, it's. Did you ever watch a show by the name of Space Above and Beyond when you were a kid? Or
Oh yeah, a long time ago. Yeah.
so that was to me like that was like the best space CGI I had seen, and it still
Mm-hmm.
ranks up there, uh, with the best of them, just because of how
Mm-hmm.
the computers work, how the polygons act, the Babylon
Mm-hmm.
5 look, because then it
Mm-hmm.
doesn't just look like some sort of weird like thing that's a part of our universe but not a part of our universe. Uh,
Yeah.
best way to describe it, unfortunately. Um, and it's how do I want to put it? It just looks like a spaceship that you know you'd want to fly, that is flying, but also
Mm-hmm.
looks like super space agey. That is just the coolest thing ever
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I know what you mean.
with
There
the
was a
Amigas, I think.
there was an old television show called Reboot a long time ago. It was by a company in Canada called Mainframe Entertainment. They also did a Transformers series. It was called Beast Wars,
I remember
and
those.
yeah, those are like CG. Like I always hear now that it doesn't hold up or anything, but if you watch those shows now, it actually works as an art style because of how the world is focused around these people trapped in a computer world that is very mid 90s, and it looks mid 90s, and
Hmm.
everybody talks mid 90s, and the CG is very mid 90s, so it fits, and it still looks good. But if you transfer that to something like, say, the comic book form and 2D images, it doesn't look right.
Right.
It's a very hard thing to do properly. So I do respect it when it's done well. It's just I don't really ever see it done well that often.
Yep.
So it's like just use practical effects if you can because it looks better. But
Yep.
again, that's just me.
Like the only thing I do is hold separate for that is when it comes to like the
Hmm,
spaceship battles
excuse me.
with people, with objects, with anything that could be of practical effect. Please do it. Just spend a little extra money, and you can
Hmm.
even get it done faster and have a prop you can reuse later. Like you don't have to treat it like an individual action with all this expensive computer time, which I guarantee you they're overcharging you for. Uh,
Hmm.
anyway, so let's bring this back. So we've established a lot of kind of what pulp isn't and what pulp could be. It's about the fun of the reader. It's about not making bad choices with all these different
Hmm.
pitfalls. It almost feels like that modern
Hmm.
movies are getting into these days. Um,
Hmm.
So for the modern era, how do you sort of take this into profitability? Like let's say that I enjoy space knights. I am writing
Hmm.
space knight fiction. They're riding around on their motorcycles, defeating the evil Black Swan lords who hate all civilization and goodness.
Hmm.
So take me through what sort of mindset should I have going into it, and how can I best deliver the best possible product for my readers?
Well, for me, the first thing I would do was if I wanted to do an idea, I would look to see where the idea originated from and look at where it ended up, like where it is today in 2020. And I would look to see exactly what it is that interests me the most about the concept, whether some people might prefer the romantic aspects of such a thing, others might prefer a more, what's the word, sort of faux historical sort of take on the subject. Others might prefer something more horror based because that's always an interesting way to take something.
Oh,
And then
absolutely.
I would go back and look at something like, say, Weird Tales, find stories similar, read them, and filter them through myself. Then outline what I want to do. Then I would just come up with my own ideas after that. I'm not the most creative person, to be quite honest. When I was growing up, I was pretty much the least creative person, yet I'm the only one writing now. I just find these things I like and I take them and I ingest them and then I repurpose them in something new that interests me.
Mm-hmm.
So that's, I think, is the best way to do it. But I find the best way to repurpose something is to take it to its basics and start from there. And the best way to look at something at its base level is usually to go back to the pulps because almost everything has its roots there. And you could probably go back further if it's something like horror to, like, fairy
Mm-hmm.
tales or something like that. If that's what interests you, I guess it would just depend on the what interests you the most, because what interests you the most is going to be what gets you into the writing the story, and it's going to be
Mm-hmm.
what's going to interest the readers because the readers want to know what you have to say about this subject.
There's
So it's,
mm-hmm.
back and forth. The readers want something and you want to give the readers something. It's That's how art is supposed to work, though it doesn't always work that way in the modern era. That's how it's supposed to work.
There's a certain element of reciprocity with it when it comes to authors and their readers. I find that the more love a author pours into his work, his or her, of course, the more that others will sort of gravitate to it. Um,
Hmm.
like with John C. Wright and stuff like that, he certainly loves his work. He
Hmm.
respects the reader and he respects the characters as well, which is something
Hmm.
that most modern and old pub don't really get. Um,
Hmm.
as much
Yeah.
as they should. And so there's like those who love John C. Wright, love John C. Wright,
Yeah.
and
And those who don't.
right. And those who don't, we politely tell them to get out. Uh, but but the love that he has for it transfers over to his readers far
Hmm.
more than modern audiences like to admit.
Yeah. I I find the same thing with most of the authors I like, because when I find an author I like, it's usually they have a specific take or way of saying things about certain subjects that interests me, even if I might not normally be interested in the subject, just because they're interesting people. And I find most of the people in who work in the old system are not that interesting, and they don't really have that much interesting to say, and it reflects in their stuff, which is very formulaic and just not that interesting.
And it's the worst sort of formulaic because if we're being real, Robert E. Howard followed a formula. There's
Yeah.
Conan, there's a mystery, there's a pretty girl or two, and then
Hmm.
there's fight scenes, whether it's against some sort of Aztec giant or against, um, what was another one? A giant snake. That's always very popular. Like he
Hmm.
followed a formula, but it was a fun formula, uh, and there
Yeah.
was enough variety in it that it was a new story every time, even if he followed the same basic story beats.
Yeah, that's As the old pulps, they all had their own sort of formula. Even Lester Dent, the creator of Doc Savage, had his own specific formula called the Lester Dent formula, which is more or less sums up to every 2,500 words, make sure something happens, and it's always escalating from the previous thing that happens. It's
Mm-hmm.
it's a formula, but it's a formula that prioritizes the audience's enjoyment first. And I think that's the biggest difference. And the old system, it's not prioritizing the audience's time because they're more interested in making sure their books are the correct length, more or
Ugh.
less. They all have to be a specific length. You're not allowed to have anything shorter than, like, I don't remember what it is, 80,000 words now or something
Right.
like that. Back in the day, you could have everything all the way up to 80,000, and now it's everything above is the only thing you're allowed to do,
Right.
which limits the type of stories you can tell at that point.
Right.
Like always see people going on about how like the short story is dead because nobody reads short stories anymore. Well, when was the last time they ever pushed short stories in the system? The only time they ever did that is in school, and it's usually to push stuff like the lottery, which I really don't like. Those types of stories where there's a moral, and kids don't want to read stuff where there's an obvious moral at the end.
Right.
Like, okay, they end up stoning the guy at the end. Thank you, because that doesn't do anything for me. And then kids get out of school and they don't want to read anymore, so they don't read anymore. And then you lost all those potential customers because you would rather preach at them than entertain them.
Yep.
Uh, That's the biggest problem, I think, anyway.
It comes down to it. I've talked about this in other streams where they don't do anything for it. They want what this horrible world we live in, to be as miserable as possible for as many people as possible, just to make themselves feel better. Um,
Mm-hmm.
they are villainous to the extreme, and they hate, uh, you know, what we love, which is apparently just being entertained by books. I didn't
Mm-hmm.
realize that that was a racist construct. I'm ashamed and shocked, but
Yeah,
excuse me.
no problem.
Mm. Is itself a horror.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure that certain pulps from the old times
Mm-hmm.
experience where all the people would like stare in, like what's that one with the sunglasses? Was that
Mm-hmm.
is that horror movie where everyone you put on the
Oh, they
glass?
live?
Yes,
Yeah, they live. Yeah, that's
yes.
a great one.
Oh yeah. And to fight this horror, we must produce better books, which is
Yeah,
what your book, The Pulp Mindset, is about, and what
yeah.
we've been talking about, even if obliquely this entire time.
Yeah, I said I just wanted a simple, straightforward book that anybody who just wants something to give them specific guidance on how to write, not just like mechanically, but and trying to navigate how to do it nowadays because it's just not easy to figure out. And there's really not a whole lot of help to figure it out either.
Hmm.
Like most of the stuff is just about gaming algorithms on Amazon. But if you can't write a story, it's not going to help you learn algorithms. So
Yep.
you got to go back further back than that. And at the same time, I wanted to write something to show how great the old pulps were and how they had a good formula that more people should take a look at. And I did it in a book that's about the length of said old pulps as well to make it a quick read so you can get through it. And if you feel like
Hmm.
going back to it, you can do it quite easily.
And of course, I know that you have a blog, but this is new and separate from the blog,
Oh, yes, everything in this book is not on my blog at all. I did it specifically on the side of my blog posting just because I didn't want to copy paste anything.
which we always appreciate. It always, So let's do a little let's do a more specific sort of test for people, because it sounds
Mhm.
like you've got the know-how to handle some pretty interesting stuff. Let's say I wish to write a horror novel
Mm-hmm.
about because we do want to talk about horror in this thing because
Sure.
I'm playing a horror game where I'm killing presumably inbred cultists. I am you know writing a horror podcast which I'll put out more later, but in an unconnected way.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, let's just say we have Derek Werewolf Puncher, extraordinaire, Esquire, etc. Um,
Mm-hmm.
how would you go about writing a story where he punches consecutively bigger and more ferocious werewolves?
I'd probably watch a lot of shonen anime, to be quite honest. That's when it comes to fighting stuff. That's more or less where I get a lot of inspiration for fight scenes.
Oh, absolutely. Very few do it better.
Yeah, if you want straightforward action where people get hit a lot, that's the best way to do it. But if you want for a pro's suggestion, is always to look back as far as you can. Robert E. Howard is usually the master of fight scenes in pulp, and he did a lot of horror as well. So he
Hmm.
would be my first go-to for something like that. But as well, there's also a bunch of different werewolf famous werewolf novels and movies as well that you could look to for inspiration. I guess it would just depend on exactly the direction I wanted to take it. If I wanted it to be like a shonen thing where it's more over the top with every single fight, or if I just wanted to be more horror based where he gets more overwhelmed and more overwhelmed. There's a lot of different ways to take something like that. Personally, if I were to do a werewolf story, it would probably involve a lot of silver bullets, but that's just me.
So you'd say you'd go the more of a route where he has a gun and shoots uh, the werewolves and sort of have a more Monster Hunter feel.
That's usually when I think of like a concept for like a character that who's in a situation and I know he's going to get in action sequences. First thing I think of what's his environment and what would he have near him, and in a
Hmm.
situation like this, what would he be using the most of? Sometimes it's a sword, sometimes it's a gun. And one thing I'm writing, it's a spear, and sometimes yeah, it's fists. But if the monster is dangerous, then I would probably consider something more long range. But that's just me. If the character is like super powered or something, it'd probably be fine with punching the crap out of them. I don't mind. I don't mind that. I watch anime with people punching the crap out of other people. It doesn't bother me.
so we
It
s-
just that depends on the
mhm.
story, I guess.
So we start
Anyway.
off with research, and then we uh, go through, looking for things that match our temperament and what we want to see in the story we're about to write.
Mm-hmm.
Afterward, we start working out our scenarios and outlining. We
Mm-hmm.
establish what we want to see and what we think
Mm-hmm.
would be most pleasing to the reader. you know, we could have some sort of one punch man sort of thing where he's, one punching werewolves and life has gotten boring and sad, so he spices it up by, getting a gun or whatever. Or maybe
Mm-hmm.
he's, a monster hunter in a knockoff of Larry Correa's excellent Monster Hunter series, which by the
Mm-hmm.
way, knock people off. Like nobody's going to mind if you steal the idea of a Monster Hunter organization. First off, they've been around, and
Oh
secondly,
yeah.
uh, you know, like League of Extraordinary Gentlemen comes to mind, and a whole bunch of other things, and
Mm-hmm.
you can. It's not so much in the usage of an idea; it's what you do with
Mm-hmm.
it. A lot of
Oh
people
yeah.
freak out when they step on someone else's shoes, um,
Mm-hmm.
but in reality, it should be more. What can I do more with it? Like the guys from like
Mm-hmm.
100 years ago, like Lovecraft, he wrote the basic cosmic horror.
Mm-hmm.
It's great. It's got all this detail, but it's the basic cosmic horror. We're 100 years on. I'm sure we could
Mm-hmm.
do something equivalent anyway.
Oh, I'm sure. Like you mentioned Monster Hunter, for instance.
Hmm.
There's a anime called Blood Blockade Battlefront, which is a lot like Monster Hunter. It's a
It's a great anime.
vampire hunting association. Vampire hunting association. Yeah, and it's the same basic thing. They're hunting down things, and yeah, they even punch the beings in that one, just like you were mentioning before.
Right.
So, like, I take inspiration from something like that, and knowing the writer behind it, I would probably notice some of the themes and some of the reasons he uses some of the things he does, and you could even apply that to your own work in new ways.
Hmm.
Just like, art is a conversation between the patron and the artist, and as well as between other artists and other patrons. So it's one of the things I like about it is you can talk about it with anybody for any reason about anything, and you can come up with all kinds of interesting stories as well, just based on simple concepts. Just like a monster hunter organization, you can do anything with that.
Right. I'm lost within the story. Bradford Walker. I'm just going to do the chat real quick. Thing
No problem.
Bradford Walker says the thing I love about Pulps. He was our guest last week, by the way. Great guest. This return and
Mm-hmm.
revival of Pulp Ways is that we're operating with a fraction of the old pub's resources, and we're eating their lunch. Absolutely true.
Mm-hmm.
Adam Haldane, welcome. I don't recall you. Though I'm sure you've been around. I'm just dense like that. Short stories are a hidden treasure. You're absolutely right. If you're looking for good short stories, I actually just me and Jaji and a few other people just published the Fantastic Schools anthology, which is in sold over 1,000 copies for an
Whoa.
anthology. That's amazing. Uh,
Yeah.
and of course, Raul Nyanzi, he's been on the show before. How you doing? Hope you're doing well.
You're all. You're doing all.
He's probably doing all right. Knowing him, he's doing okay. But so
Mm-hmm.
we've established. Oh my goodness. We've established what we need to do to start off. Now, the third bit, I guess, once we got all the scenarios and everything, we're ready. We got our cup of tea. We've got some
Mm-hmm.
lo-fi hip hop playing in the background or something. I don't know what people do to
Mm-hmm.
write. I just kind of sit there under a waterfall and, you know, purify my spirit like a samurai. But, ooh, how do I want to put it?
Mm-hmm.
We need to write, don't we?
Yep.
And
That's the
that's,
first thing you got to do.
oh, absolutely. Uh, whatever ideas and stuff like that we can talk about. We have to get that writing done someday.
Mm-hmm.
Ah, yeah. Now on to point four. Uh, so publishing, you publish quite a bit of. Um, I've seen you around, is what I'm trying to say. I believe I've got a short story of yours getting published in Soul anthology,
Yep.
um, which was funny because like with the whole collapse of Superversive Press, I wrote my
Mm-hmm.
own short story, which is also about a guy going to a pyramid, uh, with like undead like robot servitors in it, and
No.
like then, I heard word that Richard Palinelli is picking up the series, so
Mm-hmm.
like I just shoved it in and then I read yours, which was pretty good. I'm looking forward to when Soul Anthology comes out.
So am
Um,
I.
of
Mm-hmm.
course, my story is our stories are different. Yours is more of a desert punk revenge fantasy, whereas
Mm-hmm.
mine is more of a space opera revenge fantasy, with some less technological magic attached to it,
Yeah.
and more of the old gods. Um, so we've written our story. We've sweat blood and tears. We've avenged our father, and you know, we have a manuscript. Don't worry
Mm-hmm.
about the skin that it's written on. That could have been anybody's. What should we do next?
Very first thing is when you finish writing something is to go back over it again and edit it because it's not going to be that great in the first pass. First thing I
You're
always
hurting
do
me,
when I
JD.
finish when I finish the first draft of anything, the very first thing I do is go back over it because I always going to miss something stupid and I always do and it's always really embarrassing and I'm really glad I don't give it to my editor to see. But after that, then when you're ready and you'll be ready quite soon is then you find an editor, you send it to the editor to edit for you.
Hmm.
Everybody has to have an editor if you're a writer. There's no way around that one. It's not like if you're a cover artist, for instance. If you're learning to draw, you can eventually become a cover artist for your own books. You can't become an editor of your own books, or else you'll be really bad at it because you're going to miss all kinds of stuff.
Hmm.
And you need a second pair of eyes, and that's the very important thing is to get an editor to look at it for you. And if you get a good enough editor, they'll even give you tips to improve stuff you didn't even notice in the first place.
Yep.
And that's to me is the most important part of writing is the editing, at least getting those second pair of eyes to help you edit it. Then after that you can find a publisher if you want, or you can find out the ways to self-publish it, which is probably going to be Amazon, because where else are you going to go at this point?
I do consider it unfortunate there are no other good really choices to have out here.
Yeah, not yet anyway. So
Hmm.
hopefully eventually.
Yep. The biggest problem, of course, is that uh, to sort of go on a tangent, is that everyone's already got their stuff on this platform.
Hmm.
Um, and so there's a big question of, like kind of why Epic Games or there's no real good alternative to Steam. Uh,
Yeah.
at least not naturally. Epic Games is making a good point of it because they're saying if you buy DLC for a game that you bought in Steam, you can play it cross-platform. I have no idea
Hmm.
what sort of legalese had to happen to make that happen, but
I have
that's a
no idea.
good start.
Hmm.
So with I don't know, a lot of people are dissatisfied with Amazon. We'll just say.
Yeah.
So we go to Amazon. How
Mm.
do you usually go about? Do you source your own book covers, or do you uh, do it yourself? Or
Well, personally, I usually get an illustrated cover just because I think for action stories, illustrated covers are kind of necessary.
you're absolutely right.
Some people, like maybe if you're doing epic fantasy, you can get away with photo stock covers if they're edited well enough. But for action, you can't really do that. You have to have an illustrated cover. So I try to find an artist that usually matches the story I'm trying to tell. The one I've used the most uh, right now is Kukurio, who is he's done my one for Great Cat Blues and the one for Someone is Aiming for You and Other Adventures. And he's has kind of an anime style, which is kind of works for what I'm trying to get across. But you have to find the right tone for your book because
Mm-hmm.
some artists just do not have the right style for you. And if you're not careful, you might get something like a comic book style, and people will confuse your book for a comic book, and that's not going to go over well.
I
But
can
yeah,
personally attest to that. My Sheik of Mars like had a comic book style cover, and it
mm,
you know it hurt some of its sale potential. I guess we'll
yeah,
say.
it's just the way it comes off to some people. They just won't. It will give it a second look, so you have to be very careful. So what I usually do is I take the illustration into. I used to be GIMP, but then I got Inkscape because it's I don't know crashes a lot less and it's less convoluted to use.
Huh?
And then I put my own like fonts in it and add like subtle effects like shading or whatever, just to make sure like the font is very book, so to speak. It's what I did with especially with Someone is Aiming for You and Other Adventures. Went out of my way to try to stylize that text in a way that made it look like it was a novel. Otherwise, it would just come off like a comic book, and then people wouldn't give it a second chance. But
Yep.
thankfully, they gave it a chance. So I guess it worked. Um, but if you have like you're working with a publisher though, you don't usually get a say in it. So like I work with Silver Empire for Gemini Man books I'm doing. They did the first one for Gemini Warrior, and that came out really good. So sometimes you're lucky; it works out if you're
Right.
working with a publisher like that. But if it's on you, you have to be a lot more careful because it's all on you. There's no one else going to help you
Yep.
unless you hire somebody, I guess, because I think you can do that. I've never done it myself though, so
You're absolutely right. Uh, though I'm with you. Like illustrated covers, like the no CGI. Like we've said before, please.
Oh
Like if
boy.
let's say I got hired by a place that does CGI covers, like I am willing to put like $200 or more of my own money just to guarantee a non CGI cover. Like no joke, no no
Yeah,
um
those are always terrible.
yeah,
I hate those covers. Those look like GeoCities pages from back in the day. It's just
right.
awful.
Sometimes they look good. Like my friend David Halquist for the third Warrior cycle book.
Hmm.
Like there's a pretty sweet CGI dragon. Okay, it's a
Oh
pretty
yeah.
sweet dragon, but it's still like a CGI dude, and you can tell it's a CGI dude. And it's
Yeah.
it's good. It's a good cover for, as far as those things matter, but it's
Hmm.
not the same as his original covers by Clory McCleary, which I just we all have a little bit in our hearts for.
Yeah. Also the problem is it's hard to break in when so many different covers look so very similar to each other. I've seen a whole bunch of different, like for instance, let's say a young woman with her back to the reader looking over her shoulder, and there's like flames coming out of her hands or something,
Ugh.
and there's like a green tint or something, and they all look
Ugh.
the same, and it doesn't tell you anything about the book. It tells you
Right.
nothing. I
Ugh.
hate stuff like that.
Right. It's like
And it's not,
mm,
yeah, it's not any better in like old pub either, where they have random, I don't know, scenery shots or something,
right.
like commissioned
A space
random.
ship that looks cool but doesn't mean anything.
Yeah, there's a lot of detached elements in a lot of those books. Like if you look at the old covers, even like back to the 80s, there's a lot of action on the covers.
Yep.
Like the old Prydain books have action on the covers, and those are for younger audiences. But nowadays, like you'll find a Lord of the Rings book, and it'll just have like a mountain in the background. Like that was not going to tell you about anything in the story. It's just a mountain.
Right.
There's no magic there.
Right.
Yeah,
It could be any
stuff like that.
mountain.
Yeah, so you have to be very careful when you do your own covers, and you can't just cheap out like a lot of the big guys do now when they do stuff like that.
Yep. I will
Uh,
say, I am
hmm,
pleased with one part of my cover by Brian Silverbacks, and that he really got the tone of the story down.
hmm.
It's this guy with a genie that clearly looks mechanical looming over him, and
Yeah,
it's it's a really good look, but the dude is a comic artist, great guy, professional as all hell, but comic book artist. And so it's like, yeah, I thought this was a comic book, and I'm like weeping into my Mountain Dew voltage or something. I don't know. That's my general reaction to things.
oh yeah.
So we've got the cover at this point, and we've got the book. It's edited. Our editor has finally had surrendered to us and allowed us,
Hmm.
in the eternal battle, to publish it. So we go on Amazon, we upload it, and then what?
Hmm. Then you get rejected for the paperback cover not being right about 400 times.
I know.
I
I
hate that
know.
so much. I try for a week straight. I was trying to get the paperback version of Pulp Mindset ready, and it just kept being rejected, and they wouldn't tell me what the problem was. And then it turned out, oh, one of your keywords you're not allowed to use. You did tell me that, but you just kept rejecting me over and over for like days.
Right.
And then you have to get the measurements just right, or but other than that, when you finally get that out of the way, because that's the most annoying part of all of publishing, I find. Once you get that out of the way, then you get everything set up on your KDP page, and you try to find, if you can do it, because it's not easy for everybody, is to find people who will read it in time for whatever release date you have.
Mm-hmm.
That's a difficult task because a lot of people have, well, obviously lives of their own, and it's not easy to get people to read in time. If you're lucky, you'll find somebody who just really wants to read what you have to write, and they'll put a review out for you on day one, and it'll really help. Even just a single review, if you can leave for an author, helps a lot. Just because anybody who comes across the page, first thing they're going to do is they're going to scroll down and look at reviews.
Mm-hmm.
So make sure you try to find at least one person you can get that out of.
Right.
Yeah, because just early readers help a lot. And after that, you're just going to have to advertise a lot. Unfortunately, I'm not the best at advertising myself. I still have to get acquainted with Amazon's ad feature, which is a real mess, and it's really difficult to figure that one out.
I only hear bad things about it.
Yes, it's very difficult. I don't know how to do it properly, but luckily, I managed to do one thing differently this time, and it wasn't really because of me. It was because of another author called Alexander Helene, who got together a group of similar minded authors, and we decided when this book comes out, we're all going to push it at the same time. We're all going to put a blog post out. We're all going to push it on social media and get it out there at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
So when my book did come out, they all did that, and what ended up happening was it ended up staying on everybody's feed for a long time. So everybody managed to see it, catch onto it, and they checked it out.
Mm-hmm.
And and because of that, I got two number one best-selling ribbons on my very first book just for that. So you don't even necessarily need to have mastered advertising as long as you have somebody you can help who can
Yes.
help you, like a community of like-minded people, or a subculture as I prefer to call it, definitely helps a lot.
Honestly, for the first, I want to say 100, 200, the fact that I asked and was received by Brian Niemeyer to advertise fantastic schools just helped a lot.
Yeah.
And, sort of pushed our success, way beyond what we could have expected. Um,
Hmm.
I know I do this podcast a lot to as much help out other authors in ways that, I want to be helped out as, sometime in the future whenever I finally get another book out. But but it's like making a network of friends. You know,
Yeah.
the old pub does this for each other. If we are somehow less than old pub, it is honestly shameful.
Yeah, you don't want to be anything like them because they're the complete opposite.
Yep.
They take a giant chunk of your book sales. They don't advertise it. They won't give you a choice when they give you a cover. You don't
Yep.
have to really say on the editing.
And then they
You don't really
insult
get
you.
anything. You don't really get anything out of it. But when you're in control of everything like this, you could do a whole lot more, especially with like-minded people who
Hmm.
also are looking for art of their own that they want, because they're also consumers and patrons as well.
Yep.
They're not just artists. So it's like if everybody helps each other, everybody finds more stuff they might want, and everybody benefits in the end. That's one of the reasons this year I put a lot more posts out on my blog just for signal boosting, because there's a lot of stuff out there that's just not getting as much exposure as it needs to succeed.
Hmm.
And I want to have more stuff out there because that's why I started writing in the first place. It's not just for me to put stuff out there, it's because I want more stuff out there.
Yep.
Good stuff.
Yes, please. I'm putting the TP in the toilet. All right. This is a wonderful game. It's called Dusk. But
I
anyway,
know.
the it's basically an old school Doom clone, with a lot more horror aspects. Um,
Mhm.
so with this stuff, a lot of it is networking. We are interacting with each other. I now know you, and you know me, and we're going to
Mhm.
promote each other's work, like I'm doing here now for you. And when I
Yeah.
release the Time Stop King, I will be, JD. Let us, you know, help each
Mhm.
other out, because if the Romans could help each other out to make an empire, so can we.
Yeah.
Uh, and there's no promise that anything will be successful, and I don't expect there to be any sort of thing like that.
Mhm.
But it means that we are part more. How should I put it? We are part of one system more than our enemies, who, you know, like I said before, do this for each other. If the person is not being, I don't know, shunned for something.
Yeah.
Probably ate Chinese at a Chinese restaurant. That sort of thing.
Yeah, like I said, one of the reasons I started writing in the first place is because the sort of art being put out there just didn't interest me at all. So when I find people who put out what I want, I'm going to try to share it with people because I want more people to see it. I want more better stuff out there because what's out there now is not all that great, to be quite honest.
We are impoverished compared to our ancestors.
Yeah, even our ancestors of 25 years ago.
What a time! What a strange time!
Imagine missing 1996. That's just
I know,
oof. It's not that long ago, but it does feel like it was that long ago.
right? And right, like red. Oh man, but honestly though, like Brian Niemeyer has the right of it when he talks about like what were the best decades for X, Y, or Z, and it's
Mm-hmm.
like compared to now, what we have
Mm-hmm.
and what we're sort of used to. Like just the fact that someone like Brian Niemeyer or you or me or something like that is producing a book for the sheer love of it, maybe
Yeah.
some profitable love, but for the sheer love of it is itself like almost unheard of in other
Mm-hmm.
ways because
Yeah.
we're not.
That's
Hmm.
yeah. That's one of the things I got into with 80s culture because when I grew up, it was mostly about how great the 90s were and how crappy the 80s were. I don't really know why that was a thing at the time, but it was. But as I've grown older, I looked into the 80s and I found companies like Canon Films who
Yep.
filled niches that were not being filled, and they profited off of it big time. And when the big studios caught on to it, they ended up pushing into it themselves. That's sort of the thing we're trying to do here, but I don't expect they're going to be pushing into it this time because back then they were all about profits. I don't really think they're about profits anymore. I know a lot of people disagree, but I don't think they're willing to go where the money is. Let's put it that way.
I agree with you. Because if they were willing to do what the money is, they wouldn't have gotten rid of John C. Wright. They wouldn't have ignored myself, Brian Niemeyer, and others. Like we would be
Yeah,
in a completely different set of circumstances if
yeah,
if they cared about money.
yeah. It's clear because even someone like Larry Correa, his Grimoire Chronicles should have been a big thing during that whole superhero boom. I mean,
Yep.
look at that the whole thing. It's got superpowers. It's got noir elements. It's like X-Men only extremely cool and
Yes.
nothing. They didn't do anything with it.
Yep.
And there's really no excuse for it except that, well, they don't want to make money.
Yep.
What else can you say? They don't want it.
It's
So
that.
like
Hmm.
so everybody is more or less adrift, not knowing what they're going to do. So it's the job for people like us to go out there and try to find those who want to be entertained again. And I
Yep.
think there's a lot of them. I
I
really do.
I was doing research for that horror podcast I'm writing, and I discovered that like if you hit the right group, like you can punch above your weight fairly easily as an independent company slash individual who just makes things for the love of it. Like at no
Hmm.
point, even if we don't have the money and power and all that jazz of the old pub types, I guess we'll call it grandmasters, uh,
Hmm.
possible members of the Illuminati. Uh, Possible. I just said possible. That's legally defensible. Uh, it's far more fun to do this sort of thing than it is, you know, politicking or failing to entertain children somehow.
Yeah, running comic book companies into the ground, stuff like that.
Right? Like, oh, it's a company with 100 years of dedication and service. I'm
Yeah,
gonna ruin it.
yeah. That's one of the reasons we were trying in the pulp rev. Anyway, we were trying to avoid using brand names because you don't want to build something that can be taken over, more
Yep.
or less. So you have to kind of build something that can't really be. I don't think something like Superversive can really be taken over because of the way it has to be. You
Yep.
can't subvert something that can't be subverted, more or less. You can't really subvert being superversive. You can't really subvert going back to classics. So you have to build something separate from what these people want, which is just to be parasites, I think.
Yep. Oh, absolutely. Uh, oh, absolutely. Like if like there's like William Hope Hodgson, one of my favorite authors of all time. His
Mm-hmm.
Nightland's very famous. House in the Borderlands is one of the first really good experiences of like cosmic horror that wasn't Lovecraftian.
Mm-hmm.
Like he was like father of or granddaddy of something like that.
Yeah.
Christian died in World War One. His poetry and love letters are just full of this, love and grandeur. He loved his wife. You know, people give the last half of the Nightlands for a lot of flack because it's 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 um it's very lovey dovey, we shall
Mm.
say. There's cosmic horror happening everywhere, but love will win it out. And I will describe every second of love me and my loved one has for each other, especially when I kissed her little feet and she was so naughty to me. uh, you know, um, and it's like we compare this to men like John Scalzi or other types or N.K. Jemisin. You know, they have no spine.
Mm.
You know, when someone steps up to them, and I've bullied these people in real life. Uh, like they can't stand up to you. They don't like snap back. They just kind of cringe away from you. When you bring up the
Mm.
fact that they've dominated the Hugos with their own people for so long that they're now meaningless, they just go, well, whatever, like what is this guy talking to me about? You know, even
Yeah.
though this is all a conscious decision of their part, they are building
Hmm.
their own hell.
Yeah. They've taken control of institutions and a lot of genres. Like one of the famous ones I even brought up in the book is the Clarion Writers Workshop, which started this thing about 10 years ago, I think, at this point, called the mundane science fiction movement. Now, I don't have any problem with people who want to write mundane stories in space, but why do you need a movement of people writing mundane adventures in space where nothing happens?
Right,
What what group of readers are out there waiting for this? There's especially when like you have all kinds of video games that are bestsellers that take
right,
place in space or movies that are doing well, and you're writing about this. Who's this for? It's
right.
not for anybody. And that whole mentality is like taking the fantastical out of the fantastical. Is like these people don't understand what they're doing. Is literally destroying their own. They're destroying their own spaces. But I don't even know if they realize they're doing it, or if they're just that clueless, or they just think something else is going to happen because they have magical thinking powers. I have no idea. But
Hmm.
I've dealt with people like this in my life, and I find a lot of them are just delusional. They just have no idea what they're doing. They think people think things differently than they do. Like, you tell somebody like this, like, yeah, that story was bad, they'll think something like, he called me an asshole or something like that. I'm gonna have to destroy his life. It's I guess it's what's the word, gamma behavior.
Yes,
That's what it is. It's I don't know how you got so many of them in fantasy, science fiction, and horror, but there's a lot of them, and
it's
I deal with them a lot on social media too, and
right.
they're not fun to deal with.
No, and it's a lot of it is about denying reality.
Mm,
For all our fantasy and horror and all that jazz, we're still facing a certain amount of reality. We want there to be real stakes that can entertain the reader. Of course, the real
mm-hmm,
stakes involve saving Maiden, Galadriel from the horrifying dragon with like three heads or something like that, because you're ripping off
mm-hmm,
Ghidorah. But it's because why mess with the classic? Um,
mm-hmm,
but it still has that weighty action. You know, we might have it so that the hero will win from the outset of our writing. But the real
Mm-hmm.
trick is to make it exciting every step of the way. The readers will be excited if you can make it exciting every step of the way, even
Mm-hmm.
if there was never going to be a timeline when the hero loses.
Well, yeah, what audiences want in a story is basic things to happen. Like, for instance, in a
Hmm.
revenge story, all the reader wants is for the hero to enact revenge. That's the only thing you have to deliver a promise on. It does.
Yep,
It doesn't even have to be the obvious way of them. I don't know, like finding them and shooting them dead. It could be like karma or something.
yep,
But it has to just that's the only thing you have to fulfill. You cannot subvert that. But nowadays, you'd have someone like Ryan Johnson who would have some stupid reason for the hero to not be able to get his revenge and only not get it but not deserve it, and he's a fool for thinking he even should have had it in the first place. And audiences hate that.
yep.
And you can tell by the reaction of things that are happening right now.
The fact that Rian Johnson hasn't been glassed in a bar is a travesty.
His entire career is just built on subversion. That interview he did that one time was about, I want to make sure half the audience likes what I do and half the audience hates what I do. Is That's what he said, and that's not a way to write. You can't do that because you
Hmm.
don't know who's gonna react to what you do. And
You're absolutely right.
it's not writing for the biggest possible audience either. It's just writing for a niche. Those come naturally. You can't forge a niche.
Yep. I'm gonna take a second. We're having a
Sure.
great discussion here. I'm enjoying every second of it. I'm
Hmm.
gonna cover a few things in the chat. Real
Sure.
Neonzi says CGI covers only make sense for cyberpunk, and I could
Hmm.
see it for cyberpunk better from other genres. Um, Bar One Studios, old friend of the show, says stylish Criterion Collection silhouettes still look better. Will look better, excuse me, than a friggin' Blender render cover. They don't even make sense for Cyberpunk because they still do people horribly. At least light novels know how to put a damn waifu on the cover. Real Nancy says good point. Split the difference. Commission some interior illustrations as well, light novel style.
Oh yeah.
Uh, absolutely. Um, Actually, for the horror podcast, I'm doing silhouettes. An actor friend of mine happens to be doing a private detective photo shoot at a time I would only describe as serendipitously.
Hmm.
And so I'm looking to have some really great marketing material for that. Uh, for both
Hmm.
statements, good to know about reviews. Niemeyer says the ad feature is pay to play. That was all real Nancy, and I've heard that too from him. And
Yeah.
I believe that is correct because Nick Cole used to be going around talking about how to use the advertising system, how to release things, and stuff like that. But he has gone silent about it for about a year, 2 years. So I think it's
Yeah.
changed. He's a man who knows how to play a good game of poker, as I understand it. So if he, if you're copying what Nick Cole is doing, you're not doing a bad job. Um,
Hmm.
let's see here. Mega Buster Shepard says, "Hey guys." Bar One Studio says, "My problem is for art projects that I have to cultivate an entirely new audience, so I can't even lead on you guys for promotion. Unfortunately, that is true. My audience is book readers, um, and it just doesn't always work great to
Yeah.
cross something or other. Some people talk
Hmm.
about how the '80s were better and the '90s suck. Eh.
Some
Uh,
good stuff in the 90s.
well, there's tons of good stuff in the '90s. Batman,
Hmm.
Superman Adventures, Saturday morning cartoons, so on and so forth.
Hmm.
Um, Cannot bury what is public domain. I love that line.
Yep.
Lastly, Mundier science fiction is suck fic with a thin veneer of sanity. Thank you, Bradford Walker. You're absolutely right. Lastly, Mega Buster Shepard. I think it's the mindset of perpetual revolution, as constantly portraying themselves as a brand new thing. They can never be called out on their dominance. They do not
Hmm.
understand, for my own comment, that the revolution can only be paid in blood, and they are not willing to shed a single drop of it.
Oh yeah. Yeah, definitely something to that.
Hmm.
Ah, yeah. When you think about, for instance, how many fads there were in the 90s, for instance, people would always jump over to the new thing, and that transferred over a bit. But if you realize in the recent years, there aren't really that many fads anymore. And I
Hmm.
don't really know why that is, considering these people still don't have really real attention span. Maybe they moved over to memes. Maybe that's it. I don't know.
Are you
But like,
attacking my memes, sir?
I
Sir,
love memes.
they're great.
I love memes. They're great. But well, also I guess no, they're not moving to memes because they can't meme. They don't make anything good out of any of the good memes. I guess it's because they're now in control of everything now, so they just figure everything is perfect, so they don't need to change anything. So you're just going to buy whatever they put out, and that's that. And when you don't buy what they put out, well, there's something wrong with you.
Right?
All the people who don't buy my stuff must have something wrong with them.
You are racist if you don't buy all of N.K. Jemison's book over the course of 3 days. It's like, ugh. And it's
Yeah.
like I'm just looking at the uh, Pontius Pilate option, just slit my wrist in the tubs. It's like, no, please, not another one. It's like just
I just
that's the note.
oh yeah. I
N.K.
don't even remember the
Mm,
last time there was a award-winning book that made me say stand up and say, "Oh, so that won an award. I'll go check that out," because they just give their own friends awards now, so they
yep.
don't mean anything. Same sort of stuff.
The Dragon Con awards have improved things quite a bit because it's popular, but I've noticed that Bane and a few others kind of just dominate it. And I don't
Mm,
neglect their domination. It's just that I either have already read their books or
yeah.
because I am a man of quality. Uh, and my opinions are quality. But I've already read their books, or I just don't have an interest in reading their books in the future. Um,
Mm,
when I support as many things with like Brian Niemeyer and you and others, when you guys get nominated, it's just kind of like, oh, well, well, yeah, I expected it. So I
yeah.
plug it as best I can or something else like that. But it doesn't have the same feel as, say, going to the old Hugo nominations, and then it's like Dune, but then there's this short novella or whatever you've never heard before, that
Mm-hmm.
that was written. Like there's this, or just reading the old magazines.
Oh yeah. Well, there's a controversy recently about the retro Hugos, and that's the only thing I find interesting about the Hugos anymore, because they give exposure to the older stuff that you might have missed the first time, and there's a lot of good stuff out there.
Oh yeah, but they were
Like,
all white men. Mm-mm-mm.
yep, especially CL Moore and Lee Brackett. I guess they don't count though.
They don't. They're internalized white men. Don't you worry. Don't you worry. So
Yeah.
I just for the records to show that there was this famous post by some, I don't even know who it was, but basically they said that it was all white men and they ignored CL Moore, Lay Brackett, and quite frankly a lot of the other women who used to write quite a bit. And very
Mm-hmm.
successfully too. Like these women got to the front cover of Weird Tales and Other Places, a place shared only by like Conan and Howard and a few other you know grandmaster types.
Oh
Um,
yeah.
you
Oh,
know,
there's a lot of women in Weird Tales. Yeah.
oh yeah,
There's even I think someone's Valancourt books. I think it is. They're putting out a book called "The Women in Weird Tales," and it has a whole bunch of stories from the women who wrote in Weird Tales. So there's a
yeah,
lot of them.
oh yeah,
Like, and they're good too. Like I like Weird Tales a lot, especially for someone who I don't know has to hate women because I write pulp. I do quite like a lot of women writers, especially from back then.
right. It's like like one of the things that'll happen like eventually is that when we're older, we'll realize that just about every single one of us was connected by El Jaji Lamplighter. Like it,
Hmm.
you like so far, like most of the people I've come across, who aren't like big names or whatever. Yeah,
Hmm.
it's been Jaji, our mutual friend.
7 degrees of El Jaji lamplighter.
Exactly. I try to maintain an aloof status, but you know, I'm in there too. I can't be tsundere forever. Ah.
No, it's I'm glad that, for instance, recently, ever since around, well, I should probably mention Jeffro Johnson because he was going on about you stole my hashtag because my book was popular, but I wanted to mention him because he was the first person I saw an article of where I said, "Wait a minute, what's this?" It was for Abraham Merritt's Creep Shadow, where he's writing about there's car crashes, there's ghosts, there's living shadows, there's demons, there's all sorts of different stuff, and it's like you could put all this in a book and make it exciting, and that's the sort of stuff that pushed me into this whole thing in the first place. Just the fact that you can do so much with the written word, and then seeing like the modern old pub industry and they're not really doing anything at all is it's kind of a downer, to be quite honest. So it's nice to see that there are a lot of people out there now who are taking advantage of the fact that there's a wide open space now that you can do whatever you want in, and you don't need gatekeepers to keep you out of it anymore.
Oh yeah. And even with, all these things going on here, even if I am never successful myself, and my goal is to be very successful,
Mm-hmm.
I still take, a great deal of pride in the fact that a lot of these people who are successful right now are, selling well, getting, rich and getting a decent amount of living out of this new pulp experience because
Mm-hmm.
it's worth all the time, all the effort, all the strain that it takes to be your own boss, to pursue this sort of lone wolf style. Even if it's with friends, you're still responsible
Mm-hmm.
for everything that you do with
Yeah.
it. And I think in very strong terms that it produces a better product than anything modern old pub uh, modern
Mm-hmm.
is putting out today.
Yeah. Just even the first short story I put out was "Someone is Aiming for You," which I really liked that story a lot. But I got an email from it from it where somebody said, "I just read your story and I really liked it. I enjoyed this, that, and the other. Please keep writing." Just stuff like that is
Right.
enough to really want you to get up and just write again. It doesn't really matter how successful it is, though it's nice to be successful.
Oh, it's
It's more
nice.
nice to it's nice to connect with people like that. That's why I like to do art in the first place, and that's why I like to write. It's a lot of fun.
It is immense fun. Though with my short story, which is going to earn me like my first triple figure like book bonus or whatever, like sales
Mm-hmm.
uh thing for me ever. I still, get the reviews. It's like, you know what? I hate this Doom Garden one. I don't get why it's in there. It's so bloody and action filled, and I thought this was just Harry Potter fan fiction. And I'm just sitting there. It's supposed to be funny. He's the gardener, and he's chainsawing demons in half because he's the Doom Marine. I don't get it. Like I'm talking to Joshi. It's like did people not get the joke? Did am I actually bad? And it's there's so many
Mm-hmm.
different joys to writing. I just can't imagine myself doing anything else.
Yeah. Even getting people who don't like what you write, at least you still connected with them. You got an interesting
Absolutely.
reaction out of them. I mean, that's good enough for me.
Oh yes.
I
It's
mean,
so I'm complaining about it, but I'm actually very like amused by it just because it's like, wow,
mhm.
glad I got this strong emotion out of you.
No, I mean, if you're in a world where 50 Shades of Grey can get published, so why even stop yourself from publishing whatever you want, no matter what it is?
Exactly.
I mean, how could it be that bad, really?
Well said. Well, let's
Hmm.
see here. We've been talking for nearly an hour and a half. Uh,
Hmm.
Filibuster for me for a little bit. What sort of things you looking to in the future? What releases can we expect from you? And What do we need to take away from this today?
Well, Pulp Mindset was something I only started a couple of months ago while I was in the middle of other projects. Just because, well, first it came about because I wanted to write an essay for an essay collection that Misha Burnett is working with Ben Chia called Pulp on Pulp. I wrote an essay out, I finished it, I sent it to him, and then as I sat on it, I wondered more and more, maybe I should expand this into a full book. So I did that at the same time I was writing. Right now, I'm writing the third book in the Gemini Man series for Silver Empire. The second one, excuse me, is still to be edited because of the whole Corona thing. I don't know how long that's going to take, but they're busy. At the same time, I'm working on a sort of gothic horror style book. I'm hoping will be out by the end of the year called Brutal Dreams.
Ooh,
That one is, I want to say 50% done, but it needs a hard edit, so I don't know how long that's going to take. Um, while I was waiting for this freaking paperback to publish for Pulp Mindset, I was working on a short story, excuse me, which is a sequel to one of the ones was I'm going to be sending it to a magazine shortly whenever they open up, and then after that, I'm hoping next year to work on my first crowd fund, just
ooh.
because I want to try it out, and it looks interesting, so I want to try it out for myself. But that's going to be a completely new thing when I do that one. It's not going to be a sequel or anything like that. It's just something brand new. So like I got quite a lot on my plate when it comes to writing. I
I
don't know.
mm,
I don't know when I'm going to run out of ideas, but I don't think it's going to be anytime soon because they just keep showing up.
Fantastic. Of course,
Excuse me.
I offer when your crowdfunding campaign gets started to come back on the show, talk about it. I found that doing last week I did a thing with Anthony where we had
Mm-hmm.
three different authors on here, one after another, talking about their crowdfunds and projects. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
I'll certainly slot you in for one whenever you uh, put it out.
Oh, thank you.
Absolutely. Do you have anything else for us, sir?
Just keep writing.
Just
That's
keep
it.
writing. Just keep
Let's
writing.
keep writing.
Just keep writing.
Let's keep going.
Yep, absolutely. And I agree with the sentiment. Even though I've only written 1,000 words of horror thing, it's doesn't matter what it is. As long as you get it out there, you can fix it
Mm-hmm.
later.
Yep. You can
Maybe.
always edit. You can
Always
always
edit.
edit.
Easier to edit it than to write
Yeah,
it. Oh well.
definitely.
Anyway, thank you for joining me. Big shout out to Megabuster Shepard, to Adam Haldane, to Bar One Studios, and CVWX. I appreciate you all, my sweet, sweet viewers. Uh, thank you. And join us next week when I figure out something else to do because Anthony will still be gone. Have a good one.